Hello, everyone, and welcome to Friends of the Force, a Star Wars podcast. I'm your host, Brad.
And I'm your host, Sarah.
And this is our series, Bebo's Book Report. This is where we cover all things Star Wars Resistance. This is probably one of many episodes happening this weekend as part of Remembering Resistance Day, Sarah.
Yay!
Well, we are so thrilled about the episode that we're bringing you today because as part of Remembering Resistance Day, which is August 29th, in which we celebrate the show and share our memories and our passion for this series, we are talking with Sergio Paez, who is a story artist and episodic director on the series. He did a couple of episodes, and he's had over 20 years of industry experience, and it was just so incredible to chat with him and get his perspective on the series and what it was like to create something that was just so original, so unique, and also so heartwarming.
In addition to Resistance, he has also worked on the Clone Wars film, the Clone Wars series, and some fan favorite episodes of Rebels, including the finale. So he has a long history with Star Wars and so many great memories to share. And some of the things we talk about on this episode with Sergio are how he got into working with Lucasfilm and some of those first memories on the Clone Wars, as well as what it means to do his job and to be in the animation industry, and what it means to be an artist, in addition to some of his favorite memories on Resistance. So we really cover a lot here, and we hope that you'll find something that you love and are inspired by, as much as we were talking to him today.
Yeah, he's one of the first people that we've had on the show who come from this particular creative profession. So we got a lot of new knowledge about the process, which is really exciting because we are not artists, and we love learning about what artists do because at the end of the day, thousands of hours go into these projects for like a 20-minute episode, you know, and we watch it on our screen, right? So it's truly incredible what happens behind the scenes, and we are so excited to share that with all of you. So without further ado, let's jump over to our interview with Sergio Paez.
You ready for this?
Never really ready for anything, but that hasn't stopped me yet.
That's the spirit, kid. Now you're thinking like a Resistance pilot.
Yeah, well, still not used to this life or death situation stuff.
That's good, because I'm not either. You never get used to it.
So, what are we looking for exactly?
We'll know it when I see it. Wait a second. Picking up something man-made.
We are so excited to welcome Sergio Paez to the show. Sergio, we are so excited to have you as part of Remembering Resistance Day weekend. So
awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's really exciting to be here too.
Yeah. You're one of the first animation directors that we've talked to who've worked on Resistance. And I really would love to start off with you personally and like your history as a Star Wars fan. So where did that begin for you, and what really drew you to this franchise?
Well, man, I'm an 80s kid, so I grew up watching the Star Wars films, and I think my mom I was born in 77, actually, so that's when the first Star Wars movie came out, and I think my mom has a story where she took us to see, my brother and I, the first Star Wars movie, and I think we fell asleep in the movie theater. I was too young to remember anything, but then when I grew up, of course, I was watching, The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and super into it. And special effects and just visual effects in general were something I was really excited about as a kid. And that's one of the reasons why I got into animation and art, was really to, inspired by everything that Star Wars and that whole generation of kids my age were watching, the cartoons and films and everything media that was that explosion that I think Lucasfilm and George Lucas had a big part of.
Well, you mentioned that the Star Wars that kind of drew your eye with the special effects, and that's kind of what drove you to get into animation. I would love to hear more about your story about how you got into art and what drove you specifically to work in animation. But I mean, I can't art, so I'm impressed by anybody and everybody who can draw. So, where did you start drawing and really being engaged by this sort of medium?
When I was a kid, I watched a lot of TV, and this is actually something I think is kind of common with friends and colleagues of mine in my generation, where we grew up watching cartoons and just Saturday morning stuff and films and movies. And I feel like there's a lot of pop culture stuff that was happening in the 80s and 90s. And I was fascinated by cartoons and animation, and I just really loved it. And I just remember as a kid just sitting down and enjoying the Disney stuff, and certainly anything that had to do with animation and special effects, like even the Ray Harryhausen like stop motion stuff, if you guys have seen that, and just everything that something like Star Wars represents, fantasy, and even the films like Willow. I remember watching that, that's a Lucasfilm directed by Ron Howard. And even as a kid, I was like, whoa, wow, that's so cool. So I was really fascinated by that. And as I grew up, I liked to draw. My brother liked to draw. I think I followed, was inspired by him. And I just kept with it. I was one of those kids that just would not give it up. And fortunately, I had supportive parents, and I kind of used that to investigate art and kind of investigate what I needed to do to learn and improve on that. So I took high school art classes and did some extracurricular stuff there too. But I got really serious after high school, when you have to kind of pick the focus, and I went to college, and I decided to go to an art school. And that's where you really train for it, like any other discipline and profession. And yeah, it was serious. It was like the big leagues. So I really had to step up.
Yeah. And that's too, when you have the conversation with your parents and you're like, I want to go to art school. And most parents are somewhat kind of like, are you sure you want to do that? But once you commit to it and that's what you're passionate about, hopefully, you get that support from them and you really develop that craft in a meaningful way, which is exciting.
I knew what I wanted to do at a really young age. I think I was like 8 or 9 when I said, I want to be an animator. I want to be an artist. And I kind of didn't have an idea what that was. I was also into other things. And I also wanted to be a baseball player and all this other kind of stuff that I would never be. But the art thing never went away. And I stuck with it. And yeah, when it came to that point, I think some parents would be like, no, you're going to study engineering. You're going to go become a doctor or something. And I was like, screw that. I'm going to art school. I want to learn art. And I was really, I think I still am a little bit like headstrong and stubborn. Like I said, the fortunate thing is my parents were just like every other parent's like, you really want to do that? Are you serious? Like, why don't you do something else? But they let me do it despite that like doubt. And just like anything else, if you're passionate about it, you're going to find a way to be successful at it, or at least have an outlet for that expression. Mm-hmm. So I really, if anybody has this inclination, if you're into Star Wars, you should be somewhat inspired by the fantasy and the utter creation of that, the creativity that goes into these kinds of things. And there's a whole world there. There's a whole career that's behind that in video games and media and film that is, it's not anything to laugh about. It's a very serious business, and there's many hundreds, if not thousands of people who work in it. And they're all really talented and highly creative people. And that's, once I discovered that was an outlet, like I was all in, like that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah. And it continues growing as well. Right. And we've seen today, like the Star Wars Visions trailer came out this morning. And like, that is just
absolutely
so big.
I know a couple of people who worked on that. It's wonderful how that tradition continues, and that just, the creation and, everything that, like, Lucas created this world, right? And so now there's a new generation of people who are carrying it on, and that's really fun. It's exciting to see that.
You mentioned like there's this whole world behind these creative projects. And I think sometimes for fans who are on the other side of it, who aren't involved in the industry, there's a bit of not secrecy, but a lack of knowledge of what the day-to-day looks like. Because if you're doing something completely different with your life and you're just seeing the end product, you don't see all the thousands of hours that go into making that happen. And so for those of us who aren't artists, aren't in the industry, or just don't have a great knowledge of what, animation, how an animated project comes to be, what's most important for listeners to know about the process? And what do you think is really important that people might not assume when they hear like, oh, your job is an animator, your job is an animation director?
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing to talk about, because my title would be animation director. I'm also a story artist, and I've worked as a story artist for many years. So let me describe what that means for people who may not understand what that is. This is an enormous collaborative effort to create any kind of major mainstream media project. And it might seem like a very basic thing, or you watch it and it goes by so fast. It's only, an hour or half-hour episode, depending on what you're watching. Yet there are probably hundreds, if not thousands of people who are working on the sound design, the imagery, the creation of it. So I think for people to realize that it's never one person who can pull this off on their own. Even Lucas had a lot of support and a lot of help. And there's many famous people that worked through that environment. Ralph McQuarrie, I have books on my bookshelf behind me of all the inspirational guys and everything that came there. And just think of what they did and how there was a unified vision from multiple people to come together to create this world, right? So my job as a story artist and as a director who is in charge of leading a story or an episode is to ensure that vision comes to life. And my medium for making those images come to life is drawing and artwork creation. So I do a lot of manual draftsman and like drawing. So illustration. So like the doodling that we did as a kid, I do that for work. I do that on a day-to-day basis. And I use many different tools. So people might know 3D tools that you can use with the computer. I use a very fancy digital pen that I use. Essentially, it's a fancy digital piece of paper, right? And you're able to do things much faster and duplicate things now digitally, which helps. But the basis is art skills and drawing and composition that goes back hundreds, if not thousands of years for like classical art and design, right? So this is the kind of stuff that we learn through the trade, and then coming together, everybody has a specialty. So there are, writers that come up with the dialogue and the ideas. There are concept designers who come up with the background imageries, and they'll create these things out of thin air, right? Out of an idea. And there are people like me who are story artists who will create those the shots in a particular scene, and they'll put them in the order that they should be. And then we'll work together with editors and post-production people. And finally, there's a group of leaders in the project that put everything together. And those are the producers, and those are the directors, and the, supervising directors, everybody on up, and executive producers. So it sounds like fancy names, but these are all just people in a pipeline that is structured to create these episodes or these films that come out. And like I said, there's many, many people involved, and you can think it goes all the way down to marketing and translations and worldwide distribution. So there's, the amount of jobs and opportunities that are out there for people. I think, it's kind of fun to realize that and to know there are outlets for it. But yeah, it is a collaborative effort, and I'm just one of the many people involved with it.
I feel that I learned a lot last year, and I just had no idea. And this opened my mind a lot, was actually the making of Frozen 2 on Disney Plus, the 6-part documentary. And I was like, I had zero clue of how maybe what the day-to-day looked like, or what it meant to be an animator or a director in animation. And I was astounded and just so impressed by the way that everybody worked together and worked on their piece in order to make the whole puzzle fit together perfectly. And so it's so amazing to know that all these projects get to a final stage and like end up going out the door, and they're beautiful and cohesive and brilliant. And it takes every single person.
Yeah, I always say it's a miracle that any of these things come out and actually come to life. Like whatever film, even it's so easy to criticize a movie, and we go to the theater, or we watch film on streaming now, and we're just, that's terrible. That wasn't as enjoyable as something. And then you don't realize that it's almost serendipity that something comes out great. So when you talk about what happened back in the day with Lucas, and he was really cutting edge. I always have this conversation with many people about the origins of where Star Wars came from. And I learned this as I was working at Lucasfilm. I really do I gained a greater appreciation of that, because at the time that these came out, you really have to look back at the historical era in which the first Star Wars films came out. There were breakthrough visual effects, but it wasn't just that. There was the arrangement of these space opera episodes that came out, that he revolutionized really it was new to the era, right? Now, these things had been around in film history. You can go study this stuff, but the way he used sound design, right? And the symphonic score that John Williams made, right? The order in which, like, before films, the credits would start before a lot of movies, right? I think if you go back, you watch these old films and these old Westerns, the credits roll for like 10 minutes before you actually get into the film. He cut all of that out, and the Star Wars begins with a bang, and it's this booming symphony, and the scrolling letters that come by, and the big Death Star that comes in, or the cruiser ship that comes in there. It was really an experience that changed the way films were presented. Then that entertainment value came back. After this, so there's a before and there's after, right? And so now we're talking about this film language and this history that this new generation is trying to create. And yeah, it is, there's an artistry there, and there's something that I think should be said about how, I don't know if it was planned that way or serendipity or whatever, but there was something special about how George Lucas and that team put together these films. And I really do think it continues on today. And that kind of, we're talking a little bit about Resistance and how that project came together too. And yeah, it's great that we're recognizing that, because it is a unique, I think one thing that I keyed off of when we started doing those episodes was how cool the look was. And I was really excited to see that, because it was a departure from what we were doing inside the animation group that we had been doing before. And that was, of course, on purpose. They designed that, specifically for that reason.
Well, when you talk about Star Wars breaking ground and innovating the way that we, watch and create things, you were a storyboard artist on the Clone Wars film in 2008. And when you think about Star Wars animation prior to that, you had, Ewoks, you had the Droid series, you had the 2D micro series from Genndy Tartakovsky. Mm-hmm. And here you are now working on this massive project for Lucasfilm that's going to transform Lucasfilm animation for the next 12 to 13, 14 years that we're going on now, right? So how did that opportunity come about for you? And also, like, what was it like to be involved with something like that, especially, under Filoni and George Lucas at that time, and to know that, hey, we are creating something very special that is going to break ground now for not just Star Wars, but like even animation. And we're working with a huge team of people that are excited about it too. Right.
Yeah, it was a great experience. I remember that too, because a buddy of mine, who's a director at Lucasfilm, Stuart Lee, he was working on the original Clone Wars project, and then also with Justin Ridge. And they were some of the first story artists to be working there, and with Dave. And so about a year into when they started working on Clone Wars, they needed more help, and they started hiring more people. And my buddy referred me to the group. I turned in my portfolio, and fortunately I got an interview. So I go into Skywalker Ranch, which is an experience in and of itself. It's a very beautiful and amazing place to be, very inspiring. And I interviewed with the crew, and I interviewed with Dave. And I remember I kept asking them, I was like, can I see something? Can you show me what it is that you're working on? They wouldn't show me anything. It was so hush hush. It was all very confidential. They were only describing what it was. And I think I got to see a couple character designs that were floating around just the carriage house in one of the buildings that they have there. And so I kept wanting to see what they're actually producing. So I kind of went in there blind, really. And I had the conversation with Dave, and he was really fun and open. And unfortunately, it seems like he liked my work. And I remember he did most of the talking in that interview, which is usually what he does anyway. But I remember just kind of, he asked a couple questions about Star Wars and if I was a fan and what I've been working on. And I was trying to get, like I said, a little bit of a hint of what the style of the show was going to be. Eventually, so basically I had to accept and go in there blind when I was working that I was going to be working on something cool. I didn't know if it was going to be like a, straight to video thing, or if it was just going to be this really cheesy, I had no idea. I was really, curious. Fortunately, okay, so I said, yes, I'm going to take this risk. And I'm going to go and work at Lucasfilm. And then, the first day when you get there, then it's the orientation. Then finally, once you sign all those like confidential documents, you can go in and you're part of the team. And I was super excited. It was really cool what they were doing. They were doing this new 3D pipeline, and everything was in 3D, and it really had a really good budget. George Lucas was behind it. He was very, very much involved with the writing and the whole process, especially at the beginning. And him and Dave were designing this stuff. But yeah, Lucas was an integral part of making that first Clone Wars series and the movie, come to life.
I can't imagine just being like, okay, I kind of know what I'm going to do on this job, but I know what my job is going to be, but I have no idea what I'm working on. That's got to be a little scary.
Yeah, it was a risk, really, because again, a calculated risk. Obviously, that Lucasfilm does quality work, and I knew that it was a solid company, and so I've worked on many projects where you're like, sometimes you're into it and sometimes you're not. So I had no idea if I was going to actually enjoy the content that I was going to create there. And you really, that's part of being, choosing to sign up to a project. Fortunately though, and then, I trusted my buddy who had recommended me, and I looked up Dave, and he had done like the Avatar stuff. And, he was he had the right mindset for this kind of a project, right? And everybody involved. So you go there, there's really talented people. And of course, as soon as I saw the character design, I was like, oh yeah, there's some really heavy hitters here. And this has a really good budget. There's George Lucas behind it. And so then it was like, all right, this is serious. I really have to do the best job possible. And we really put in our all, to make, it's really, I think it was an exciting time, but it's also like professional pride where we're all there trying to do our best. And I think the story team that formed there, and I remember it was just a special time because I remember we were in this loft and there was only about 5 of us on the story team when we first began. And Dave came in and did a review. And I remember one of the first reviews that he did with the team, or at least when I joined up, and we were all there. He looked and he was really satisfied with the work that we were producing. And that was episode 116, which is they do this by numbers, right? So it was I couldn't even tell you the title because we remember them by numbers, but it was about halfway through the season 1 of Clone Wars, right? So at any rate, after that, my buddy Stuart was like, "Wow, we have a really solid team here. This is great that we're finally getting, the type of help that is going to make this project great." So that was a fun thing and exciting thing to be part of.
Was there anything specific or that stands out that you learned working on Clone Wars specifically that kind of had allowed you or continues to allow you to flourish in your career since then?
Man, you're asking a very open-ended question that there are so many answers to that. And because let me tackle this on a couple levels. There's like the artistic level that I think there's a ton of takeaways that I carry with me. There's also, let's say, the personal and interaction level that you have with the crew and the team. Like those are some like lifelong friendships. I hope, knock on wood, I'm still around, but like we have forged, I think, really tight friendships. And I still keep in touch with a lot of people that I work with, and we're all kind of, industry collaborators. And so there's that level where the interaction there was really cool and very inspiring and really strong. And then just on a personal level too, is like, what kind of growth was I doing? Because I think I was like, relatively young in my career, and I had done a couple things. I was at Pixar before, but I felt like this was a time I was really trying to spread my wings and grow as an artist. And artistically, a couple of things that I learned is one, the language of Star Wars. Now, this is something that I don't know how many people really realize, but there are flight rules, for example, when it comes to Star Wars. There are fighting rules when it comes to lightsaber battles, and it's very much designed and intentional. For example, the spaceships fly like World War II fighter planes. They are propelled forward as if they had propellers, not projected forward as if they're jet engines. Okay, there's a difference. The difference being is the way that they bank and the way they turn. Okay, and so these are things that you need to take note of. And this is all stuff that Lucas had established. George was very particular about the way spaceships enter and exit frame, the way that you have to show weight. So a big ship would fly much different than a more nimble fighter, and stuff like that. So there's Star Wars flight rules, and there's also the way that you fight with the Force. Now, so there have been many different variations over the years of how people interpreted these things, and even J.J. Abrams, I think, was a departure in the recent 789 episode, where I think it's a little more modern take. And then going back to like Mandalorian, and I think it's obvious because Dave's involved, and you got a lot of the, let's say, the Lucasfilm crew there that come from the more classic way of how the Star Wars language is elaborated, that I think people were responding to that as well. So basically what it is that the Force is a very intentional power, that it's not some random, and this came directly down from George, that you had to really focus your chi, so to speak, your power, your internal power, to be able to utilize the Force. It's not some, like, you snap on a finger and it's all of a sudden a magic wand. You really have to be intentional about it. And there is a level of proficiency and expertise that you have, and you grow into. Obviously, a Jedi Master would have more Force power versus a Padawan. So then we had to show that progression, and it had to be visual. And so that's what, some of the things that I learned speaking with the Star Wars universe, right? Of course, there's also film language stuff, which is wonderful to work around these heavyweight filmmakers. And a lot of, some of the guest directors that we had there were, personal friends of George Lucas and Edward Murch and Robert Dalva, who people may not know, but you should look them up on IMDb. These are really heavyweight guys that came in to help the crew out. And, just working with that kind of experience was wonderful.
Well, you mentioned, speaking of directors, you mentioned Stuart Lee, who you also got to work with him even more as part of Resistance. And to pivot over to that, you worked on a couple of episodes with him as a story artist, the episodes that he was directing, such as the series premiere and the finale. But I would love to start with, on the topic of Resistance, we're here remembering Resistance. That's our whole event. I want to ask you, how do you remember Resistance? And what does this series mean to you when you reflect back on your time working on both seasons?
I loved the episodes that we produced. I was really into the look and the characters that are in the Resistance show. Justin Ridge, who's the supervising director on this, really, my hat's off to him and his creative ability, his way that he handled the stories and the crew. It was really admirable and he's a wonderfully creative artist and incredible story artist and very talented draftsman, by the way. So, him and Dave go way back, and that's why he was on there for the crew. And so he's the supervising director. And then also there was, Dave was the executive producer. So he was the one who really oversaw what we were producing. So what I remember there was this great collaboration that we had. And then myself, Stuart, another director, Saul, and Bosco Ng, we were all part of the team of the directors to, create the episodes. And then, I only stayed on for about 1 or 2 seasons. And Brad Rao, who's now supervising director on the Bad Batch, came in and was also helping out there. And so it's just great. There's really talented people on it, and we had a lot of fun. It was an enormous challenge because there was technical things that we had to overcome, and I hope we did a good job with it, and I hope it shows off in the episodes. But it was not easy. No way was that easy yet. I think it was worth the effort.
What I love so much about Resistance is, not only the visual style and the language that we get throughout the show, which is stunning and so unlike, what we received in Clone Wars, which is also so beautiful, but different styles and that sort of thing. But also just, it had such heart, and the visuals I think, lent themselves to that really, really well. But how did the different animation styles, like the cell shading kind of style versus the different 3D animation on Clone Wars, did that affect how you created scenes and action and how the characters moved? Because you can note that the characters are a bit more noodly, as one might say, in Resistance than they are in something like Clone Wars.
Yeah, that was also on purpose and designed that way. The rigs, so the 3D rigs, the 3D puppets, if you think of them this way, the way the characters are built in these 3D environments. There's a structure there underneath. There's like a skeleton that you can move these characters with. So in particular with Resistance, what they were able to do was create a much more exaggerated feel to the animation, and they were able to push things a lot further. And this was led by the animation directors and Justin, particularly to kind of push what we had done before on Rebels and even the Clone Wars, where if you see a lot, and it has to do with the design and also the application of the show. So Clone Wars was a little more realistic. Rebels had a little more dark kind of connotation to it, but Resistance had a little more fun and a little more, let's say, upbeat. You can see that with the colors and with the way the characters move and bounce. So there's much more of a comedy focus there. And that was also reflected in the animation. So I was really into that. I was really excited about how they were able to create a little more acting and life with the characters in BB-8 and just the facial expressions. And yet at the same time, we try to keep it tight with the flight sequences and the kind of the spaceships and the space battles, because that had to be absolutely Star Wars. And so there wasn't an exaggeration with the way that they fly, with the way that they flew, or the way that the kind of, battle sequences happened. So the action stuff was still, I think, much more consistent to what we know in the Star Wars universe, yet the characters were a little more exaggerated. So I love that kind of application that they did.
Something that you said, I was watching one of your videos on your YouTube channel, and something you said stuck out to me, where you talked about visual storytelling and the importance of that, and that no amount of shading and rendering and trying to cover up your story problem is going to fix the story at the core of it, right? So that story has to really be strong and stand on its own. And I think with Resistance, it's an ensemble cast. There's so many different actors and characters involved, and you really have to develop them over the course of 2 seasons. So I want to know, for you, with that visual storytelling in mind, how do you balance all of these different unique designed characters to make them stand out, have moments that are big or small, and make sure they're each differentiated, from I think for you, both as a storyboard artist and as an episodic director?
It's not a difficult, it's not an easy thing to do, I should say. It's very difficult to create a memorable and unique character and put them into a situation that is really unique. And the tools that we have are the visuals, like what kind of camera angles are we using? What kind of shots are we using? And it's true. One of the things that I really like to focus on is understanding that it really does come down to likable characters, and you put them in an environment or a situation that people remember, and it becomes unique. Because I don't want to see stuff that I've seen before. I don't want to be able to predict what an episode or what an outcome would be. It's always nice to have some kind of twist and some unique take on it. And that, I think, you can apply to many of the characters that were in that cast in Resistance, because of course there's a little bit of history with Poe and of course Kaz. There's a new cast of characters that came in there, so you have these classic characters that are there, or the ones that have a kind of continued life or lead on into in the other films. And so you have to kind of integrate them, but then you have a little more leeway with the captain and everybody else that was there. And there you can design it and create it so that it's memorable. And hopefully, if you do a good job, the emotional content of these characters is what people bring in. They want to see what's going to happen to Kaz. They want to see what's going to happen to the crew on the Resistance, and they want to see what happens next and follow the episodes and follow the next kind of threads that are going on from one season to the next. And my take here is that no matter how good your animation is, no matter how amazing your special effects is, and I think there are some scenes that are really amazing, just visually they stood out really cool. Oh yeah. But that we can't rely on the sound effects and the special effects to really carry the story. We have to rely on the characters and the situations that we put them in to really bring the audience in. And if we do a good job of that, that's what's going to make it memorable. That's what people are going to be, talking about from years to come. And also hopefully want to rewatch some of these episodes, or maybe even bring on a new generation of people into these things. So yeah, that's what at least my personal focus is, to try and make that as good as possible. And if they do a good job with the animation and the special effects, well, then great. It's just icing on top. But the main foundation of it has to be strong for me.
Which is why I think Resistance works so well, because it's got, like you said, the actual cake and then the icing. And me and Sarah love a good, we call it the vroom vroom of Star Wars, right? George Lucas loved race cars. He loved driving. He grew up in Modesto, driving cars everywhere. And Resistance is the show that really harkens back to some of those inspirations of Star Wars, right? The Colossus, all the different races that they're doing with the ace pilots and flying. And you talk about the visuals, those scenes really stand out to me. The flying and the way the drag comes off of the ships as they're flying to kind of create those wings in a way. It's to show the flight path. So it's visually stunning. And we love the show for that reason.
Great. Yeah, there was a lot of thought that was put into those races, and they come down close to the water. There's going to be a big rooster tail that comes up behind them. And these were things that they really designed and we put in the shots to try and enhance that feeling. Right. And the races and the ace pilots there, that's something I think we wanted people to, and audiences to really kind of connect with and think like, oh man, wouldn't it be cool if I was in one of those ships, or wouldn't it be cool if I could race with these guys? That's kind of what we wanted to get that feeling across.
I definitely feel it. And I also think that one of the coolest moments in the entire show for me is when the Colossus, which we think is this stationary place where they're all just living in the middle of the ocean, is actually a ship, and it rises out of the water, and it's this epic moment. And I think that's one of the most like visually stunning and also cool factor moments. It's very high on the Star Wars list. And I think people who haven't watched the show yet are completely missing out on the things like the races and that the Colossus, alongside all of the wonderful character moments. But when you were talking before, you did mention the characters that you brought on from the movies, the sequel trilogy. And so what was it like to work with some of those bigger characters like General Leia and Poe and BB-8 and Captain Phasma in this show, where you were creating this whole new visual language for these characters, but had to do something a little different for the ones that were already seeing in live action on screen?
I remember that there was a big effort to get the actual voice actors to be the same people as the real actors in the films. That's really hard because these guys have, really tight schedules too. They were already filming the movies, and just to get them into a recording studio was a real challenge. I remember there was many instances where they had to record in different places. I think Captain Phasma was recorded in London, and then I think Poe did a couple sessions in not London, in New York, and also in Argentina. And so it was coming from all over the place because these guys, the actors, were working. And I think the fortunate thing was that they got all of the actors, so it was really great. With the exception of Leia, of course. And so, for example, Leia had to be treated very carefully because we wanted to show she's General Leia now, right? And we have to show her not only like respect from the other characters in the Resistance, but that as kind of fans of the history of Princess Leia, that we want to show her with a lot of just visual homage to what she represents. And I remember we were very careful with the way that we presented her, and the cameras were usually, we lowered them so she would feel a little more important and imposing in some of her shots. And that was also reflected in the voice acting there too. So we really thought about it to make it happen. And of course, the voice acting, when you have the real actor there that's also playing the role in the films, it's great. They really bring it. The emotion is there. You have something to go on. We listen to those tracks a lot, and we reference that in the shots that we're doing. And if there's any kind of adjustments that we can do to make it better, we'll do that. So it's great. Captain Phasma was fun to work on those episodes where she was there. So it was really exciting.
Yeah, you mentioned Leia, and gosh, I'm just thinking now if God rest her soul, Carrie Fisher, if she were able to have been a part of this series, it just would have been even more special. But I think you guys handled Leia with such care. And one particular episode that you directed was Station Theta Black. And she gives this parting wisdom to Kaz at the end, where she says, "The Resistance doesn't belong to me alone. I help guide it, but everyone can play a part in it, just like you are now." And I think that quote really speaks to the spirit of the show and like what the show is about. It's called The Resistance because anybody can be the next hero, and we see that with like every character that's involved. So I would just love to know, how do you contextualize that parting wisdom from Leia, and like how do you think why is it important to the spirit of Resistance and even like Star Wars, you know, just being part of something larger than yourself?
Yeah, this is the crux of the show, really, is that the message that you're getting across, yes, there's entertainment value, but there's also this level of inspiration that we want to bring to new fans and, you know, hopefully the younger generation that will watch this to get inspired in any way, right? And the Resistance represents this, you know, fictitious battle between the bad guys and the good guys, right? And I think it's this idea that even though you're small, and let's say you may not have the resources of like the big guys and the bad guys or whatever opposition you're coming up against, that you still have value. And there's something there that you can, within yourself, if you're able to concentrate that and really build up the support, that you can do it. And there's an individual responsibility. There's an individual level of success that you can come up with, even if you are a normal person, let's say, which is what Kaz represented. He's really somebody who's young and like kind of green, but he, through what he represents and the principles that he holds, he shows to even people like General Leia that he's a worthy person to carry on this resistance battle, right? And that's very special. You know, that's something, hopefully, that people will get that message, even though, you know, it's not like written out, so to speak, but that's kind of what's inferred by what's going on with the crew and everybody else. And that team effort and what happens on the Colossus. Yeah, all of that is really the general overlying message of the show. And then really in Star Wars in general, which is kind of cool. That's something, hopefully, that tradition will carry forward.
Since you've worked kind of both in capacities of directing episodes and being part of that team, as well as working on storyboards and making sure the story is cohesive and coming together, does coming from a storyboard artist background inform what you do as a director? And do you feel those things are quite intertwined in the work, or are they completely different?
Yeah, absolutely. I always say, because I do a lot of training, and one of the things I do kind of behind the scenes is I train artists to become story artists and to get into the industry in the entertainment field. And one of the things I tell these guys that are coming in there is that you are a mini director. It is your responsibility when you take on a scene to ensure that you are creating the best possible solution for that particular scene. So as a story artist, I truly believe this, and this is kind of what I was taught. You know, I was mentored by other people too. And this is, you know, George and Dave and everybody else who's involved in this. It's all this big learning process where you kind of come into your own as a storyteller. And through your own interpretation and your own experiences, you're going to express yourself. And as a story artist, it's your job to take that in the particular scene and solve those problems and create the most amazing visual experience you can for your audience. And as a director, it's your job now to take those scenes from other people and put those together in the episode or the film. So you are somewhat of a mini director. And then when essentially you graduate and you have enough experience, you can take on more responsibility and have a bigger chunk of a story to work on. And that's where you kind of become a director or a film director in a long format. And you can see the ebbs and flows of the story and track all of those threads and the characters there. So absolutely, that training as a storyteller starts when you are a story artist. And that's kind of some of the things that I like to impart with the crew. We run a mentorship program where we help people learn these things. And it's really difficult because there's many moving parts to that training. And one of the reasons why we do this is because it was very difficult for me to get that kind of skill level and knowledge. You had to work at it. And it's only the kind of like insider training. You have to be on the inside of a studio on a story team, or to be kind of apprentice with the director to learn these things. Right. And that's where, in a lot of ways, I think Dave Filoni felt like he had a mentor in George Lucas, and just being there and learning by somebody else who had a lot of experience was, one of the ways that he learned and improved some of the stories that he was doing. And the same thing for us on the story team. That's what we should always be learning and improving this stuff. But that's part of the key, is that it starts at that story artist level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And speaking of being a story artist, I mentioned before that you Stuart Lee directed the series premiere and the series finale, and you were a part of both of those. So I would just love to know, how does it feel to be a part of the team that's working on these bookend moments of the series? You know, like right where you start with Kaz being the recruit, and then right at the end where you have Kaz finding his family with the rest of Team Colossus, this very like happy ending, everybody comes together. And so from a creator perspective, like how does it make you feel to like kind of see this thing shepherded from the beginning to its end, and like knowing that you've closed the page on that story with the rest of the team?
Yeah, it's super satisfying because we were there from the very beginning when the first scripts came through and they were doing the designs, and we were still working on Rebels at that time. And so just starting it off, trying to figure out what these characters were all about. And then to kind of wrap it up as well, I was boarding on some of those sequences there too towards the end. And it's so thrilling. It really is exciting to be able to run that full thread, to understand the characters and really put them in the situations that are going to make like somebody like me who also wants to watch these things for entertainment value, just sit back and be like, oh yeah, this is really fun. Or I can enjoy this. And, you know, I had a part in creating that stuff. So it's great. It's a really fun experience that I don't think very many people, and this comes from like the creator side of things. They understand the thrill of when you create something from nothing and you see an audience's reaction. It is so addictive to sit down and be like, oh, they're just laughing at my jokes, or like the scene that I did. Wow, they really, you know, I can see their faces light up when that scene goes by. And that's what it is. It means to be a filmmaker and a storyteller. And it's a really wonderful experience.
Now, you mentioned Rebels. You were working on Rebels at the same time as Resistance, and I feel like we can't neglect Rebels getting to talk to you because you worked on the series finale for that as well, along with Bosco Ing and Dave Filoni as co-directors. A show that, it's funny, like every Star Wars animated show like gets such a just passionate fan base, you know, and people love these stories so much. And I think Rebels really struck a chord with a lot of people. And so like, what was it like to work on that? And also like have other people involved in the process. There's 3 directors working on one episode, especially somebody like Dave, and also like Bosco Ing, who Sarah and I have been a fan of some of his work on Resistance as well.
Yeah, Bosco's great. And we all had, we took it in parts. So Dave is kind of the last word on everything. We have to, you know, present to him the editorial passes that we do. We sit down in the editing room, and he really is the one to guide the episodes, right? And he's also the guy that has the power, so to speak, to come up with new ideas on the fly there. Like we can suggest things, but in the middle of it, he'll be like, oh, wait, let's stop. You know, how about if we change this line of dialogue to this? And, you know, we take notes, and then sometimes they'll go back and re-record stuff. The process of the like season finale was we knew we wanted to have a big, longer episode that had this like big threat. So we had to take it in pieces. So I took one chunk, Bosco took another, and Dave actually did some work, some story work, which, you know, normally as the executive producer, you have so many things going on. You're reviewing scripts, you have to do just, you know, kind of administrative work that you're kind of separated from the day-to-day activity. He did take on, I believe, if I remember correctly, some scenes himself and started boarding those out and creating them as well, and just getting dirty again with the with the nuts and bolts of directing. And then all that gets sent to the editorial room, and then the editors and the directors together will come together to make their thing. So the way I thought of it was I had one act of a bigger final episode, and I had to make sure that act was great. I was in constant communication with Bosco to make sure that my act kind of weaved in well with his, and we were, double checking scenes. And of course, when we played all together, we're in the room screening this with the rest of the crew as well, like the leads, and making sure that everything is covered. So it's a really fun collaborative process, and it was great that we all got credit for doing that. So it was a fun it's a fun experience. But that's the creation process that is really hard. When you're in it, it's really stressful and it's very difficult. You're trying to rack your brain, like how am I going to come up with a solution? And I have there was 3 or 4 guys on my team to create the actual the scenes, and so I'm working with them to actually do this in the way that we need it to be done. We don't have to do it on schedule. There's a clock ticking to make sure that we hit the time requirements there when these things are going to broadcast. So all of that is rolling. And so that's where you really have to be prepared as an artist and to have the support from your team to be able to pull this off. So yeah, Bosco and I, we were on Clone Wars together. We go way back and it's just great to have that kind of collaboration where it's very smooth and fun.
To close up here, before we let you go, we have just 2 super easy, no stress rapid fire questions. Right. I promise, no stress, no wrong answers, And just wondering if you have a favorite Star Wars movie. Is there one that speaks to you?
Well, I have 2 answers to that. I have a recent Star Wars movie and I have a classic Star Wars movie. So the recent one is on your T-shirt. I really like Rogue One, Brad, from the recent times. I thought that story, the Suicide Squad and just the emotional depth that they got from Rogue One was wonderful. And that the visuals were great. The space battle is amazing. So I really like that one. Classic film, I have to say, I love Empire Strikes Back. And that there's, just a really cool thread there. And the sequels, to be able to pull off a sequel like that was great. And yeah, I remember as a kid just enjoying it. And I still think it holds up. If you watch it again, I found a lot of entertainment value in it.
Definitely. Lots of thrills, lots of crying from Rogue One, all of the emotions in Star Wars, which is exciting. And another rapid fire question is, do you have a favorite character from animation, from live action? You've worked on, lots of animated shows, but also, just as a fan of the movies and the franchise.
Well, okay, I have a shameful response to that is one of the characters, and this is partly because it's close to me. I got to design General Loathsome back in the Clone Wars days, and I designed that character, and I also boarded him out in a couple of scenes. So I thought that was just really fun that I got the opportunity to do that. So that's my cheesy answer to that one. He's one of my favorites, but yeah, a character that I didn't design that I just enjoyed. That I enjoyed, kind of watching or doing something with was now I'm trying to remember her name. It was Obi-Wan's girlfriend back in
Satine.
Thank you, General Satine. So she was I just love the fact that they had a character who was a pacifist. And Dave gave me a hard time for that too. He's like, it's called Star Wars for a reason. And I was, we would get into some heated political debates, but that I just love the fact that we had a pacifist character, and that it's just another point of view in a world that's not just black and white. So I thought that was really great. She's another one that I thought was a cool character.
And our very last question, we ask everybody this usually when they come on, but what does Star Wars mean to you at the end of the day? You've had a lot of personal relationships with it, professional relationships that have just really elevated your career trajectory. I'm sure it means a lot to you. So I'd love you to kind of, wrap it up with a bow, like what it all means to you at the end of the day.
Man, it means a lot more that I've been through this professional experience and having worked at Skywalker Ranch and then, being there when George was around, and all of those things is this wonderful, memorable experience that Star Wars kind of transcended the movies for me. So the movies were kind of something that I watched for entertainment value that I wasn't associated with because I didn't work on those movies. But then when I got to actually work on Clone Wars and the Clone Wars film, and then all the series that we did, it became a much more personal thing. And so that's what Star Wars really represents to me. It represents an evolution of filmmaking that I got to be a part of. And I've been to the archives and I've seen the original Ralph McQuarrie illustrations, and I've seen the Death Star, the real one that they actually used in this film, right? Cool. It is wonderful. Like, you have no idea how beautiful and how unbelievably great the artistry is on these films. and it's all just really, really well preserved. And the matte painting. So if you guys know that the backgrounds that they used to paint for these films have a level of artistry that is just unmatched. And Ralph McQuarrie did a couple of those himself. And, to see it in the book is one thing. To see the original is unbelievable. It was really, really amazing. So that experience, because the artistry is so overwhelming. So you see a Rembrandt in the museum it's just leagues ahead of what you can look in a picture book. There's no comparison, right? The colors and everything else is just so wonderful with seeing the stuff firsthand. The sculptures, everything that was there is just so inspiring. So that is what I take away is this experience. It's a professional, it's not even a profession. It's a personal experience that I had being at this wonderful playground that, I will remember forever. It's a wonderful career, life experience that I had there.
Yeah.
That's what Star Wars is for me.
I love that answer. And, thank you for your contributions to the Star Wars tapestry as it continues to unfold. And hopefully at some point we'll get to see your name on the credits once again in the future. So we really appreciate. Yeah.
I would say this too, if I could, to the young artists out there, people who might have an inclination to be creative and get into a creative endeavor like this. One, that it is possible. There is a career outlet like this, and me and many, many hundreds of other people represent that. And something that, if you're really interested, I would point you to the website that we have, storyboardart.org, where you can learn these things. We train people on how to get into the industry and to improve their storytelling skills and become a story artist just like I am.
Yeah. No, it's incredible stuff. And I think that is really valuable work because you don't know where to go or what to do until you actually learn it and you get that experience and that guidance. And that is just so important. Anything's possible with Star Wars, so here's to the future storytellers. So right. Sergio, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Last thing I'd like to ask you is, where should our listeners be following you or your various projects online? Is there anything coming up that you'd like to make sure that we know about that people might be interested in?
Yeah, well, certainly you can follow me at sergiopaez.com and come check me out. Give me a share, a like on Instagram and follow so we can all be connected. Love to see that. I have my personal Instagram page there, but I am also associated with this group, Storyboard Art, which helps train artists. And we're going to be participating in the upcoming Lightbox Expo. So this is a professional artist-centric convention that is all going to be online. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can come check it out. And there's going to be many, many, many talented people that have worked on films that I bet we all recognize. I know some of these guys personally. And in fact, I'm going to be interviewing some of the crew, like Derek Thompson, who worked on episodes 2 and 3 with George Lucas. I'll be talking with him in some of our live streams. So you can check all of that out if you go to the Lightbox website at lightboxexpo.com. And it's really affordable, even for people who may not be in the industry or the entertainment industry, just to kind of be fans and look at the artist and follow the artists that you might like in the films that you enjoy. You can get original artwork and you can probably talk to these people personally. Well, at least online. That's what the format is for this particular event. They do have an in-person event, but this year is going to be online, which does allow for more reach and for people all over the world. So check us out for that, for sure.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate your time. You're such a wealth of knowledge, especially in just your profession and your industry. So thank you once again. We hope you are remembering Resistance like the rest of us and thinking back to some of your best memories on the series. And until next time, Sergio, may the force be with you.
Likewise. Thank you, guys. It was a great pleasure. We'll talk to you soon.
Wow. Look at all of your fabulous possessions, Kaz. You have so much stuff. Ooh, what is that?
Oh, it's my lucky trophy, Niku. It reminds me of home.
I once had a pet named Lucky that reminded me of home. And then it died. And then I ate it, and it was supremely delicious. And then I had severe...
Whoa. That's good, Niku. I do not need to know anymore. But hey, thanks.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to our interview with Sergio. As you can tell, he has an encyclopedic knowledge of creating stories and directing episodes of animation and working within that field. So again, it was just so wonderful to have him on the show and get his perspective on Resistance. as we continue to remember it this year as part of the second annual Remembering Resistance Day. So lovely to have him on.
I also want to make special mention of all the things that Sergio mentioned at the end of our interview with him, including storyboardart.org, as well as the Lightbox Expo. Lightbox Expo will be online. As of recording, it has yet to happen. So September 7th through 12th, 2021 is when it will be happening this year. So if you are an artist and interested in storyboard art and interested in animation and all things the entertainment industry and with regards to art, then definitely check these out. Links to both of these places, as well as Sergio's socials, will be in the description of this episode. So we were thrilled to learn about them. And despite not being artists, I am very interested because they sound very cool. And I feel like I have so much to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, it's so special to be talking about Star Wars Resistance this year. And this is just one of many episodes that you can find this weekend on our podcast feed, or even go back and listen to some of our old interviews as part of Remembering Resistance. So go check those out for sure. But if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, so all of our newest episodes drop right into your feed. And also leave us a written review if you have a couple extra minutes in your day, because it helps other people find the show and join the discussion, especially for those fellow Resistance fans out there. So if you know one, definitely send them our way, and let's talk Resistance.
And we also have a special thanks to our patrons. Our patrons help to keep this show running every day, but we are so grateful for them. And they are Amy, Anna, Brian, Cheryl, Deborah, Donnie, Elegy, Jesse, Jen, Knights of Ren, Huang, Levi, Lindsay, Lucy, Marie Claire, Neil, Rachel, Sarah, Saber Bouquet, Sky Talkers, Travis, and T. We appreciate you.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you all once again for listening, and until next time, Team Colossus out.